Mental health is an essential topic. Just this week, I wondered to myself, what are those skills or those things that we didn't learn at school that I wish we had? Emotional intelligence and mental health is one of those things that came to mind. In today's world, the stats around men's health require the attention of employers, countries, and the medical profession. Imagine you are in a crowded room and still feel alone, or you want to speak to someone about your own problems, but you don't know where to start. I really want to lay this out by sharing some stats around men's mental health. One study found 77% of men polled have suffered with symptoms of common mental health conditions, such as anxiety, stress, or depression. 40% of men had never spoken to anyone about their mental health. 29% of them have said they're too embarrassed to speak about it, while 20% say there is a negative stigma on this issue. Today, on the You Got This podcast, we shed the light on mental health and emotional well-being with Chris Miller. He is the founder and the chief incrementalist at Incremental, bit of a mouthful there, a coaching and training business focused on assisting companies and individuals to determine their long-term goals and incremental steps that are needed to achieve them. Chris has a diverse background. With over 25 years of experience in the coaching and wellbeing industry, Chris is passionate about helping individuals and teams increase their engagement, productivity, and profitability in whatever form that takes. Leveraging his expertise in coaching and his own struggles with mental health, Chris aims to debunk the work-life balance myth and provide customized solutions to meet the diverse needs and goals of his clients. I love the fact that Chris is open about sharing his own story and his own struggles, because when we shed a light on it, when we focus on other people's experiences, it can actually help us with our own as well. Chris believes that small steps make a big difference, and that by prioritizing well-being, engagement, and culture, organizations and the people that make up those organizations can unlock their full potential and create lasting positive change. I love the fact that you talk about lasting positive change, because mental health, emotional well-being, it shouldn't be a fad. It shouldn't be something which we want to tick a box. It should be about driving change and making it last. So I love that. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here today. We met at a networking event at the British Chamber of Commerce Dubai chapter. Yeah. And we've spoken at length on these sorts of topics. Yes. So it just made sense for me to have you here as a guest today. So thank you.
I'll talk the ears off of somebody about this kind of stuff. So yeah, no, it's lovely to be here.
And I think that's the beauty of being passionate about such topics, isn't it, Chris? Is like talking about it, sharing, shedding that light.
Yeah, I think that's important, right? And I think you put it beautifully. It is, you're just shining a light on something. I can't fix anybody because nobody's broken. It's more that if there's something within your life that's not really serving you, that's not bringing you kind of positive, life, a more positive life, a better sense of well-being, it's shining a light on that. It's being aware of it and then making the steps to change it, because, well-being is it's a lifelong thing. There isn't a beginning, a middle, or an end. It just goes on. Every day is different. Every minute is every hour. Everybody knows this. You can wake up feeling great and something happens and you feel worse, and then something else happens, you feel better. It's a constant roller coaster. I think the issues for a lot of people, especially for men, come when we're not aware of it. We're just kind of trudging through life, and every now and again feels a sense of discomfort or dis-ease and aren't really sure why. And I think anxiety and depression, those really do quite often don't have a specific point you could point out and go, oh, that's when that started to happen. It's just a slow drip effect. And I think awareness is massively important in trying to find ways to work your way through it.
You're amazing. And, like, we're here for a certain number of years and we're going to have different experiences. We're going to experience the peaks and troughs of life. And from those experiences, it's learning to navigate our emotions and learning to build that sense of resilience and even self-regulation. Do you feel it's like we need to go on a journey to really get to know ourselves to then understand how we can deal with things?
Yeah, and I because I think, I'm quite introspective. And so, and I'm passionate about this kind of thing. So understanding what, makes me tick and hopefully being able to align that to how other people tick and what, makes them feel better and what makes them feel worse. I think it's difficult because a lot of people aren't like that. And especially men, we don't like to talk about our feelings. It's not, if you use a cliche, I mean, it's a cliche for a reason. It's, true a lot of the time. And I think a lot of men think, if I'm not feeling, as good as I did, there's something wrong with me, there's something wrong with everybody else, or, I've just got to tough it out. And not in a big macho way, but just this is just life. I mean, it was the same for me. I thought I had to do everything by myself, and when I got to the stage where, and this is the ridiculous thing, I always say to people, oh, my depression isn't too bad, but it's mine, and so I went to speak to, eventually, thank my wife for forcing me into doing it. I went to speak to a doctor, but I would just cry for no reason, and I just felt a bit hopeless and a bit down a lot of the time, and then it'd last for 2 or 3 days and then it'd go. So you're like, oh well, it's gone again, but then it'd come back round again. And there wasn't anything specific. I've got, I live in a wonderful country, I had a decent job, one lovely wife, beautiful son, all the good things. But there was just something not right. And for me, it's actually probably most likely just a serotonin imbalance in my brain chemistry. So, it's not that there's anything wrong with me. I'm just wired a bit differently. And I think a lot of the times the way mental health is perceived and the stigmas around it are about there's something wrong with you. You're not normal. And, for a species that, our brains are hardwired to want us to be a part of a group, and one of the most, anxiety-inducing things that can happen to us is if we feel like we're being ostracized from our group. So if you're not normal, in inverted commas, according to whoever, then, that can be really stressful. And I think that's a real shame because, I always say to people, we're all uniquely exactly the same, and it's because we have this paradox of being very, very individual, but most of us are kind of very similar, in so many more ways than we're dissimilar. So yeah, I just think it's a shame really that men build it up, or not men, maybe society, whatever, but we've got to this point where it's difficult to talk about. And, there could be a million and one reasons that we could talk about why men find it particularly difficult. But at the end of the day, if we should be living our optimum life, not every day should be, big grins on our faces because, that's the way to the crazy house. But we're supposed to go through that full gamut of emotions that you mentioned earlier. And we're supposed to feel all of those emotions appropriate to what's going on around us. It's when they're not appropriate to what's going on around us that then maybe, you might need some help. And it's much better to try and get some help than just sit there alone with it, because that's when the drips start. And if you use the analogy of, water dripping on stone, it will go through stone eventually. So
So thank you for being so honest about sharing an insight into your own experience. So you said that you went to the doctor and you spoke to someone as well. So how did that help Chris?
I mean, lots of ways, really, because it helped me to be more present with my family, to have a better relationship with my wife, with my son. And again, it's all a work in progress. It's not like I take a pill and all of a sudden, hey, it's fun, Bobby. Like, I still get grumpy, I still get, things upset me. They're just appropriate to the situation more often than not. And so it enabled me to kind of focus myself a bit more, realize where there were aspects in my life that I could actually take steps myself to challenge things. I mean, as you mentioned, I'm an ex-personal trainer. So, health and exercise has been important to me for a big chunk of my life. I mean, the stats on how good exercise is for mental well-being are, for everyone to find anywhere on the internet. I got to the point where I wasn't exercising and I wasn't doing things that I knew could help, because I just let those drips kind of build up. And what the pills that I take help me to do is just to be a bit more proactive, so that, I do remember to exercise. And I make it a part of my life, and I do remember to meditate, and I make that a part of my life. And I'm very lucky because I'm a bit of a habit freak. Once I get in there and it's something I really want to do, then I'm all over it. But that's I guess what it did for me. It just gave me some space. Talking to someone and taking the medication just gave me some space to actually see that a lot of this was just my own perceptions of the world. And I think a lot of the time that's what people forget, is that, we don't experience the same world as everybody else, right? It's only our perceptions and then our reactions to those perceptions of how we see the world. So fundamentally, we're all living in our own heads. If you get really kind of, too focused on one thing, or you get, something just grabs too much of your attention, that's the way you'll see the world. It's, I mean, it's fascinating when you kind of think about it, that there is a physical, tangible world, but how we experience it is all up in our heads.
Yeah, it's our paradigms, our perception of the world. For example, there's perception theory, isn't there? There's what's Monica's view of a situation? What's Chris's view of the situation? And then what's the view of the fly on the wall?
Exactly.
Right, and we'll have 3 different perspectives. And that's just based on who we are and our mindsets. Yet when we challenge those things, we can say, actually, is that what really happened?
Yeah.
If I put myself in Chris's shoes, how do I see the world? If I put myself in the fly on the wall's perspective, how do I see the world? And it shifts the way we look at things as well.
I mean, it's massive. When you think about it that way, there's a number of studies actually, but about eyewitness statements for in the court systems, and how ridiculously flawed they are. I mean, 2 people can say exactly the same thing and view it and remember it completely differently. I mean, there are so many studies on how our brains trick us into, the one with I don't know if you've seen the one with the gorilla that walks, the guy dressed up as a gorilla who walks across a basketball court. I mean, there's so many of these where, and that's, I think the thing with the whole justice system is startling, that we still, are so reliant on witness statements of things when we know they're flawed and, almost worthless, because, it is literally someone's perception of what happened. I mean, especially when you put people in, heightened situations, stressful situations. I mean, completely goes out the window.
And our bodies change when we're in those stressful situations as well. So Chris, like, you're really passionate about, like we've said, mental health, emotional well-being. What if we were going to go, through your life and some of those key things that have happened, how have they impacted the person you are today and who you want to be in the future?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I suppose when I think back, and it does take some time because I'm 55, but I suppose the first one was my parents. So my dad left when I was about 7 or 8. So that was a big impact because I was quite a confident, sort of cocky kid up to that point. And then we had to move. So we moved across I'm from the UK. We moved across the UK. And I got bullied at kind of primary school for, being the kid with the funny accent or, whatever the reasons were. And that knocked a lot of the confidence out of me. And that took a long while to find it back. I think, that for me has been quite a challenging, I think it ingrained difficulties around self-worth and self-belief very early on in life. And then, but then you're a kid and you're very resilient to things, and you bounce back and you make friends, and, things change. And this is the beauty, I think, as you look through is, especially for people who are a little older, all you got to do is look back and see how many things have changed in your life to know that things change all the time. So, yeah, I mean, I think that one was a big one, and quite detrimental. I think when I had a dream to join the armed forces, and unfortunately, for some medical reasons that I to this day don't really agree with, that never happened. But I got within 7 days of joining, and then was told that it wasn't going to happen. So, and that at the time obviously was a big blow, and that's taken me a long time to get over, because it was really, really important to me. But again, when you look back at these things, I wouldn't be sat here with you if I had to join the arms. The likelihood is I wouldn't be here. And so I think, all of these things, it's about self-examination, right? And I think when you start to look at situations and how you've reacted to them in the past, and, you see that that's just that point in time. That's how you reacted. I mean, I was desperately disappointed by not getting in the armed services because it was so important, and there's nothing wrong with that. To carry it for as long as I did, it's probably not as, doesn't serve me quite as well as so I think, that's in hindsight taught me resilience. But at the time, sent me, I dropped out of school, went and worked in loads of different places with loads of different people, which again, if we look back, I could ascribe a lot of my ability to talk to people from anywhere who do anything as if, we work together, or, we were friends, or whatever it is. And I think all those different experiences, I spent a lot of my life thinking, I haven't got a career, I don't have a career. I'm not climbing the corporate ladder. I'm not, and I didn't really feel like I fit a lot of places a lot of time. And I just kind of did lots of different things to earn money. But, now I think, what an amazing experience I've had, what an amazing life of variety of, I mean, one of my jobs, so I was in sales at one point. I sold incontinence care to the NHS, which I love to tell people now. Probably wasn't as proud of it at the time because I was a little bit younger, but it taught me a lot of things. It taught me what I do for a living isn't my identity. It's just something I do for a living. I mean, this, the coaching side of things, that's taken a long time to come to fruition, and it's probably more about who I am. But that that was something to do, something to earn money, and taught me so many amazing things. I learned to ski with that company. So, if I hadn't sold incontinence care to the NHS, wouldn't have learned to ski. So,
no, thanks for sharing that. And, like you talked about not getting your dream job, and then like there might be someone out there today and they might have lost their job, or they might be struggling with a life circumstance. Like, what would you want to say to them?
I think I'd say to them, and this might sound a little kind of, I suppose the English expression would be airy-fairy, but it's like, what is it that you actually want? That situation has happened, and there is nothing you can do about it. You've lost your job. You're not going to go into the boss and he's going to go, okay, you can have your job back. So we have to deal with the situations as they present themselves to us. And, as much as we spend way too much time in the past and probably a bit too much time in the future, we only have the one moment in time all the time. So I think it's important for people in difficult situations to realize that the difficulty has already happened. And now what can you do about it? And it's I love Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and he talks about, I've written it down, it's when you realize that you can't change the situation, we're challenged to change ourselves. And I think it just says it beautifully, because so often we spend so much energy, berating the world and life and, for something that's already happened that can't be changed. And that's not to say that, you lose your job, that you should be happy and, and immediately thinking forward. There's an appropriate response. You've lost your job. Obviously that's difficult for anybody. And it's important that you have those emotions, but equally, it's important that you recognize that once you've had those emotions, there's a point at which you need to say, okay, that's happened. What do I do now? And, that's the challenge for everybody. It's easy to, look outwards and talk about, how hard life is, how rough it's been for you or whatever. After a certain amount of time, you just have to stop, and you have to be willing to kind of go, okay, well, there's nothing I can do about that bit now. Now I can the only thing I can do is deal with now. And easier said than done. Simple, nice.
What I found really powerful about what you just said is that, like, feel the emotions of what you've gone through.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes we kind of like suppress those emotions. We might be angry, we might be frustrated, we might want to cry, but we keep it within ourselves, and then it starts to boil up, and then it will come out in another way a bit later down the line. So when you said, we can't control the situation, we can like feel the emotions we're feeling and then move forward from there. I think that's really powerful.
Well, it's important to that we understand, as we said previously, we're supposed to have all of these emotions. A life without them is no life at all. You're supposed to be angry, you're supposed to be sad, you're supposed to be miserable, you're supposed to be happy, you're supposed to be joyful. All of those things make up a rounded and beautiful life. When we try and suppress emotions that are appropriate to the situation, that's when the problems start. And I think, like I said before, I'm not of the social media age. I remember when there wasn't an internet still, and phones were all plugged into the wall. But I think, it's so important for us to accept life as we perceive it, And I think so much of, the internet's a wonderful tool. I think a lot of the times social media and the way that that's developed has built this kind of comparative tool. So we're supposed to look outwards and see, how we perceive the world around us. But when we're constantly shown things that are, at worst fake, at best, a slight alteration, you're then comparing yourself to something that's not real. And that sets off all kinds of alarm bells because, as we said before, it's important that we feel like we're important that we feel like we've got purpose and that we are a worthwhile part of society. And if we don't, because the way we're viewing the world is from people who have no qualms about faking photos and showing us snapshots of life, it's setting us up for a fall. So, when it's understanding that social media, it's a frivolity, it's a way of connecting to lots of people. It's here to stay. There's no getting around it. But I think it's taking it at face value. It's how much of that is real. I mean, I was on Facebook the other day and I said to my wife, I can't remember what we were talking about, but I'd seen something and I'm like, I don't even know if that's real. It was about the storms. It was like there was something about the storms, and I was like, I don't even know if that particular bit that they're saying is real, even though it's it's a source that I've believed before. I think as I say, human beings are so complex that when you look at the world and how you perceive it, if you believe everything that you see on social media, you're going to find yourself very disgruntled with your own life. And why? Because someone else has kind of faked something, giving you a snapshot when they weren't crying into their gin at 10 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is. And so I think it's really important that people see these things, accept that they're part of the world today, but don't don't put too much value on them. And the value comes from what you're doing, who you're being around the people that are important to you and in your own circles.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, we've seen that, haven't we? In the studies have shown the impact of social media, fake news, and that whole digital world can really skew our sense of reality, that we're trying to live up to an expectation that someone else is claiming their life to be, and that could be really scary.
Yeah.
For everyone.
And that's one of the things I think, you say there about expectation. So my son is 12 and a half. So getting to that teenage, and so we've gone through a lot of the it's not fair stuff with him, and obviously it's always easier to kind of tell somebody else rather than take it on board yourself. But as I say to him, it's like nobody's ever told you that it's supposed to be fair. Like, life isn't fair sometimes. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's not. Just that's the way life is. It's not emotional. Nature is amoral. It just doesn't. There's nothing personal about it. It just happens. And I think a lot of the time, issues arise from a disconnect between people's expectations and their reality. And the closer you can get those two things, the happier your life will be. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned. That, and I'm responsible. No one else is responsible for my life. No one else is responsible for the things that have happened in my life, regardless of, their people have played a part. Everything that's happened to me is a result of actions that I've taken, reactions that I've had to situations. Once you accept that, it's brilliant because no one's got any power over you. It's me. So I'll take all of the glory. I'll take all of the, the hits and the depressive bits. But it's all mine. And I did, when I did my NLP practitioner, that one bit of NLP was one of the biggest things that's changed my life, is that regardless of how much I might stamp my feet and, cry about things not being fair, it doesn't matter, because I made the decisions that put me in that place, and I took that, and I'm the one who had that reaction and took whatever action that reaction required. So I think it's, you get your expectations and your reality, a lot closer, and then realize you've got all the power to do whatever you want to do. And all you got to do is get out of your way, and so many wonderful things can happen. And that's not to say, you'll have millions, but who's to say you won't? But, for me, it's just made me a lot happier as a person.
It's almost like you had that turning point or that moment that gave you that realization.
Yeah.
And it's so empowering, isn't it, when you read something or you go through a journey and then something just sparks within you, and then you realize that you've kind of got the answer.
Yeah.
And it's not easy,
No.
and like you said, we're meant to have these kind of roller coaster of emotions, hopefully not a roller coaster, but more of a gentle peak and trough. But when we feel we've got the answer that feels right to us, it can really almost free us.
Yeah. And as even then, and I think part of that was being in a situation surrounded by people who, and doing a course that very much made you think. And yet, I heard that and I was like, oh my God, but then it's, daily you're thinking, it's something will happen and you'll be like, oh, I can't believe that, and I still do it with, driving in the car. I mean, I'm terrible, but I'm like, it's getting quicker and quicker for me to de-escalate from, those kinds of situations where I'm like, it's, nobody died. It's okay, let it go, because otherwise, the other driver doesn't care, so why do you? And why then carry it with you for so long to, mess up the rest of your day? It's,
No, powerful stuff. You've got a book next to you.
I do.
It's the Daily Stoic, everyone, for those who are listening, and maybe for those who decide to watch this episode on YouTube. So tell me a bit about Stoicism and what it means to you.
I mean, Stoicism for me is it's a kind of a blueprint on how to approach life. And it sits really well with me because, there are a lot of lessons and aspects to Stoic philosophy that tie in with stuff like CBT or ACT, the acceptance and commitment therapy, but also, what we were just speaking about with the NLP, this idea that you are, the master of your own mind. And it, a lot of the Stoic philosophy is about, how do you approach the world knowing that you have full mastery, over your mind. And that is the teaching, that's the lesson that you have to learn every day, is that you do have that. You can have that if you want it. And when you relinquish that mastery outside of yourself, it only leads to bad things. It's never going to serve you as well as if you, and what I love is that they talk about, stuff just happens to you, but you're the one who gets to choose, how do I react to this? And it's such a wonderful way to live life, I think. and this is like, what Marcus Aurelius is Emperor of Rome. I mean, one of these guys, I think Epictetus, was a slave, so many of and thousands of years ago. And I mean, what I like about Ryan Holiday's, this particular book is that it gives you a up-to-date, a translation of the phrases that are being used. So, if you don't necessarily understand the nuances of the language that's being used, they kind of translate it a little bit for you. But I just love the fact with this that, every day, so I since I'm big on routines, every day I meditate, every day I read a page of this, and I'm not saying that it makes every day brilliant, but it certainly sets the bar a little higher at the start of the day. And that's not, I say, it's not that things always then go right, but I've got a much better chance if I've read some of this, done my meditation, and done a bit of exercise. The day's got off to a good start. So, hopefully I'll continue that momentum.
Is there anything you want to share from there for today?
Well, I'll do today. It's a little bit
What's today's date?
Today's date is April the 26th.
Okay.
And this is from Marcus Aurelius, his meditations, and it is Things Happen in Training. And he says, when your sparring partner scratches or headbutts you, you don't then make a show of it or protest, or view him with suspicion or as plotting against you. And yet you keep an eye on him, not as an enemy or with suspicion, but with a healthy avoidance. You should act in this way with all things in life. We should give a pass to many things with our fellow trainees, for, as I've said, it's possible to avoid without suspicion or hate. And then, so what I do is I read the bit that Ryan and Stephen Hanselman have written. Do you want me to read that bit? And then I highlight bits that I like. So they've said, this means by seeing each day and each situation as a kind of training exercise, the stakes suddenly become a lot lower. The way you interpret your own mistakes and the mistakes of others is suddenly a lot more generous. It's certainly a more resilient attitude than going around acting like the stakes of every encounter put the championship on the line. When you catch an elbow or an unfair blow today, shake off the pain and remind yourself, I'm learning. My sparring partner is learning too. This is practice for both of us. That's all. I know a bit more about him or her from my reaction. And from my reaction, they're going to learn a little bit more about me too. And I think, the great thing there is that, it takes the importance out of what happens in the day. It's not, for so many of us, things that happen that we get so angry or so sad or so whatever about are not life and death. They're just things that we've built a habit. Our brains love habits. So, because they're so energy efficient. If you get upset by something and then get upset by it the next time it happens, the next time, you're building neural pathways in your brain to make that your go-to reaction. And you have, then you're kind of reducing the way that you can experience life. And we need we need neural pathways, we need reactions, we need habits. But it's like, are your habits serving you? And if not, change them. It's, again, simple and not easy at all to change habits. Takes, I think on average, I read somewhere 63 days to change it, to actually ingrain the new neural pathway. And it takes that practice. But yeah, when I found Stoicism, again, a bit of a light bulb moment for me, and I know the kind of more modern interpretation of what being stoic means, especially if you're British. Is very stiff upper lip, and but that's not what Stoicism is about. It's a real life way to make the most of every day of your life. And I think, it's helped me no end. And I will read this book over and over and over until it falls apart. So, or I do.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing that. I have the book on my bookshelf. So I go through phases actually when I kind of read every day. And when I first bought the book, I went straight to the date of my birthday just to see what was written on that one for sure. It's been so amazing to hear about your journey, and you've been so honest and real with what you've been through. So all of those things that you've been through in life, today you're here, you're helping other individuals, you're helping other organizations. So what do you do as part of the services you offer? How do you help society?
It's a big question. How do I help society? Well, I mean, I think the mental health stuff, when I became aware of that there was a problem, that there was an issue that I could do something about. Once I'd started down that path, it seemed really important to me to start talking about it, because, I wouldn't ever want anybody else to feel the kind of loneliness and the hopelessness. And, look, I don't think I'm certainly not anybody special. I'm the everyman. I'm, Joe Average, and I'm absolutely fine with that. And I think that's the important bit, is that, these things affect everybody regardless. You don't have to have a big story. You just, have to not be living your optimal life to then think, well, something needs to change. And when I started talking, then I find, friends of mine are struggling, alone and not saying anything. And by me saying something meant that they would say something, and then they started, on their own journey. And I think, if I could do anything, is help those people is the most important thing in that aspect of the work that I do. Outside of that, I mean, in terms of incremental, and the way that I try to help organizations and individuals is very much on focusing on their big goals. What are their big dreams? When you think about, well, what is my optimal life? What things does it involve? I think it's massively important to have goals. You're not going to get anywhere unless you know where you're aiming at. But I think a lot of the time we get distracted by the goal, and we forget that every single day we have to take a step. And I used to do a lot of endurance events when I was in the UK. And I always, use the analogy of a marathon. There's a start line at a marathon. There's a finish line at the marathon. The finish line is the goal. That's your big dream. You get the medal. But unless you take a step and then another step and another step, and another step, you're never going to get there. So as much as that is important, and it's important to often lift our heads and look where we're aiming at, so that we know we're on the right track, we have to take those steps every day. And that's where the kind of incremental bit came from. So I try with organizations and individuals to say, right, what's the big goals? Great, that's awesome. We're going to keep that in mind. We're going to keep our focus on that. Right, what are we doing today? And then what are we doing tomorrow? And what are we doing the day after, and the day after, and the day after? And it's, I think, again, I don't want to kind of blame social media for everything, because it's not fair on social media. But, we get very tricked into, there's a easy fix for everything. You can earn this much money just by doing this. Or, some influencer will tell you they earn this much, writing books on Amazon, or, selling mugs on Etsy, or, and what very often doesn't come out in that initial bit is how long that's going to take you, what else you've got to do, how much money you're going to have to spend to make that money. So, that's the important bit for me, is it's not sexy, but it has to get done. And, you do the work every day, regardless of what the outcome is. You put the work in every single day, because at some point you'll lift your head, you'll be able to look back and see how far you've come and how much closer you are to, to what it is that you decided you want. So that's kind of, in a nutshell.
So like the consistency part is really important. That's what I'm getting from what you're saying. So you go into companies, you do workshops. You do...
So I do workshops. I also work with teams who maybe aren't functioning particularly well as a unit. And again, I mean, we were talking you said in the beginning, debunking this work-life myth for me is massively important, because there isn't work and life. There's life, and then work is part of life, as is relationships, as is, finances, as is fun and, faith or whatever. And it's, when you realize that work is only a part, it's an important part, right? And you want it to be a part that you really are engaged with, because who wants to spend, 40, 50 years of their life doing something they hate? I mean, you're not going to come out at the end of that as a particularly well-rounded or happy individual. So for me, it's saying, right, there is life, and everything else is in that, is below that. And then, because what that then means is you start to recognize that you are not a different person in the office. There are aspects of your personality, I'm sure, that come out more in that than when you're at home. But you don't walk from home through the office door and become a completely different human being. And equally going back home again. If you have a bad day at the office, you're going to take it home with you, generally speaking. If you have a bad, morning with the kids, you're going to take it into the office. And I think it's really important that we treat people very holistically. They are people, regardless of whether they are, and all of the things that are happening to them in their lives impact on how they show up in life. And so what I try to do is to get people to have more awareness around that for themselves, but also for the other people in their team, to build that, that sense of culture and community. And then just make sure, if you're dealing with companies, that, the company's values and purpose and missions, everybody's aligned to that as well, and that they understand it and that they know what they are, and what's expected of them in work. Because I think, again, one of the issues that I've seen in the past is that, people just turn up to work, do the bare minimum and go home. And I just feel like it's such a shame, because, like Muhammad Ali said, if it wouldn't have mattered if I wasn't the world champion. If I'd have been a trash man, a garbage collector, I would have been the best garbage collector in the world, because it's about your life. It's not about the company. It's not about who you work for. It's about how you living your life. And again, it comes back to, you own that. If you own that, your boss could be really horrible, but you get to choose how you live your life. You get to choose how you react. You can't change people. I mean, that's another big learning that there's no point me trying to change people. People are people. If they want to change, they'll change. If they don't, they don't. I can only change how I react to situations. And that is just an everyday exercise. I have to relearn that every day and practice it and practice it and practice it. And, hope that at some point, I'll be like, yeah, no, you've got this. I'm doing this more often than I've not. So, yeah.
That's amazing. So say for our listeners out there might be someone sat in London, in New York, in the IFC right now, and they're listening to our podcast, and what tips or what advice would you give them to kind of make the move towards their own mental health and emotional well-being?
I think the big thing for me is daily practice of whatever you decide is the thing that you're going to do, whether that's like meditation, mindfulness. I mean, I do do that every single day without fail, but 10 minutes, and that's it. And that just kind of, knocks the cobwebs off, sets me up in a more mindful state to start my day. But it has to be every day. And I'm trying to think how long I've been doing that, but it's years I've been doing this 10 minutes every day. And for most of that time, I didn't get it, didn't really understand it. One day it'd be good, next day it'd be, rubbish. I'd get lost in my own thoughts, didn't know what I was doing. And it's only recently that I've realised that that's all part of it, that it's okay if it's bad, because there isn't a bad or a good. It's just I'm just experiencing, that moment. And so I think, with anything, it is that I think, daily practice. Don't get sucked into what other people's views of things are. When I was a personal trainer, I obviously, I worked in the gym. It was my gym. So, I had a lot invested in it. And I worked there, 6.5 days a week. And I trained 6 days a week. And, told people, well, everybody can find an hour 3 times a week, whatever, you're going to say. And then when I moved into corporate, I was like, where's my hour 3 times a week that, and it took a long time for me to figure out how to remanipulate my day to be able to get some exercise in. And I remember I was a member of a men's group, and the guy who was facilitating it said to me one day, what's the issue? And I was like, well, I'm not training anymore. Training was a big part of what I did, and I'm not doing it. And he's like, okay, so could you do a minute's worth of, squats? And I was like, well, yeah, but, what's a minute? I've been training 6 days a week, hour and a half at a time. And he's like, well, no, but then, you didn't say the issue is I'm not training 6 days a week, an hour and a half each time. He said, you're not training. And I was like, yeah. He said, so just try it. Just do a minute every day. You can do a minute. Anybody can do a minute. And so I started on that, and pretty soon I wanted to do 2 or 5. And he's like, doesn't matter. You do whatever you want. However much time you got, you give to it. And what it's really opened up for me is that I was so ingrained. I had this dogma so ingrained about this, if you go to the gym, this is what you're supposed to do. And, and I'm not saying it doesn't work, but it's very strict. And so now, yes, I go to the gym, quite often I'll spend an hour, sometimes doing cardio stuff, 2 hours in there or whatever. But if I'm not, sometimes I'll just do 5 minutes of exercise. Sometimes I'll do 20 minutes of exercise. Sometimes I'll do half an hour, 15, whatever and I'm, and the thing is, it's being okay with that and letting that go and letting go of this dogma around things that we hold on to so tight, because it doesn't serve you. If I'd have kept holding on that tight to this idea that I had to train 6 days a week, I wouldn't be training at all. Now I'm free. I can train whenever I want. Sometimes I set an alarm and I'm working at my desk and the alarm will go off after an hour and I'll do, 10 push-ups. Well, if I did that every single day for a year, I'd do 3,650 push-ups. Right? Not telling me that after 3,650 push-ups, you wouldn't feel better. Or even after, a week of doing that, you wouldn't think, do you know what, I'm really enjoying this. I might do some more, or I might do something else, or, I'll find, it's those things. It's freeing yourself of these restrictions that we put on ourselves about how things should be, and just going with the flow a bit more about how things can be.
That's amazing. And if you were talking to an employer right now, what would you say that they can start doing to help their employees?
I think it's about opening conversations. It's about getting to know people as people over and above just, the employee, the accountant, the office boy, the whoever. And I think it's because it's important to know what makes people tick, because it doesn't take a lot to really engage people if they're not engaged. And I'm trying to think who did the study. Was it Gallup did a study about, and it's like quiet quitting in the UAE is like 63% of employees are quiet quitting. And that's going to cost money, because if they go, you've lost that expertise. You've got to find other people. You've got to train them up, and you don't know whether they're going to go next as well. Whereas what you could do is look at your team and say, and really look at where do you see that there might be things that could be improved upon? Where does the team see? Involve them in it. Like, where do they see? And actually use this expertise, because I think it's so easy to get into a rut of, even as the boss, even as the CEO, is you turn up, what you want is, because our brains are like that. We want an easy ride. That's why we make habits, because it's energy efficient and and it's easy and it's comfortable. But you're missing out on so much, if all you do is expect, okay, right, well, Lisa's going to sit there and she'll tap away at the computer and then she'll go home and she'll have done, what she does. Well, how restricted is that? How it's narrow view of what could be. I mean, Lisa might be sat there tapping away at the computer screen thinking, do you know what, if we just did this, if I changed how I do my thing, it would change everything and we'd save so much money, and and it would be, and I would feel great, because I'd helped the company. And, as human beings, we find our greatest joy doing things for other people. Yeah, that's when we feel the most joyful. It's not doing stuff for ourselves. It's helping others. And I think that's something employers should get on board with. I think it's something employees should get on board with. The last company I was working with, they'd all siloed in, everybody was holding on to their own little bit of the business. No one was communicating. You just put them in a room. I'm not saying that it's the solution and it's fixed or whatever long term, but all it took was, I think we did 3-hour sessions. By the end of the first 3-hour session, they were already like, oh my God, like communication is the issue that we have. Like, and everybody's like, oh yeah, communication. None of us are communicating, and they suddenly realize, I'm not communicating, but you're not communicating with me. If we just had a bit more communication, everything would feel so much better. And the sessions that we just built on that. And I think, like I say, it's for employers, it's looking at what are you not optimizing out of your workforce? I mean, you have a wealth of experience. There'll be things that people know how to do that you don't even know they know how to do that could help, that could, but even just showing an interest gets people more engaged. And as I said before, who wants to spend 8, 9, 10 hours a day doing something you hate, or just something you kind of can't really be bothered with? I mean, it's too much of your life. It just seems like such a terrible waste that we seem to have got ourselves into this situation where that seems to be the norm, and that we don't expect more of life. We don't strive and create changes within our lives to say, I know I deserve more, I want more, and I can put the effort in, and maybe I'll get more, and maybe it'll be amazing. We just, let's all just sit hunkered down and hope that, it all gets comfortable until we don't have to do this anymore. It's just terrible.
And like you said, we spend most of our lives at work.
Yeah.
And you might be in a company for 3, 4, 5, 10 years. That they become your work family.
Yeah.
And if you're not getting on, if you're not communicating and you're seeing each other day in, day out, then it's quite a sad place to be. So organizations can make the steps. And like you said, it can be something as simple as communication. So imagine an organization starts to communicate, they start to share, they start to create improvements within their own teams and around them. Suddenly, you're creating a thriving environment.
Yeah.
People feel part of something bigger than the paycheck they're getting every day.
And I mean, even if you just wanted to put, finances on it, you're going to get less sick days. You're going to have less, what's it called when presenteeism, when people are there but not really there. Less absenteeism. I mean, it's all proven through multiple studies that the amount of money you save just by starting to do this stuff. And then what you also do is if you go into a place of work and you enjoy where you work, and I'm not saying you have to necessarily enjoy the work that you're doing, but why not give it a go? Why sit there going, it's rubbish, this job? Do something about you. You've got, and if you can do that in work, it spreads everywhere, right? Into your family life, you have more energy, you are more hopeful, your dreams get bigger, and all of these things start to have it's like a snowball. And I think if you had the choice, which we all do, right? It all comes down to, we all have a choice. We might not like the choices sometimes, but we always have a choice. Would you choose being miserable for 40 years or actually trying something, trying to change it? And I literally cannot imagine anybody, who's sane and rational, to whatever extent, who would say, yeah, no, do you know what? Being miserable for 40 years sounds like the best option for me. And yet so many of us do it. And if I could do anything in the world, it would be change that.
So any companies out there, HR departments, business owners, they want to bring you in to run a workshop, how can people find out about you?
So I have the various kind of slagging off social media, and now I'm going to, but I have a website. So it's incremental, so in-cre-mental.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Chris Miller, or Incremental. I'm on Facebook, Incremental, and Instagram as well. So I post a lot of content. If people want to get in touch, I'd be more than happy to have a conversation. And it's always with a conversation in mind. Like I wouldn't take on work without having a conversation with that person first. There needs to be an alignment. But I love coffee and I love chatting to people. So, if there's coffee and a chat involved, I'm there.
Wonderful. It's been a huge pleasure to have you here today.
You.
So thank you for taking the time out, and thank you for being part of the You Got This podcast.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Cheers.